Huge news in this weekend, just before the weekend ended, that the Xbox Series X and S outsold the Switch and PlayStation 5 in US dollar sales. And I want to talk about it today. I want to go over an article that Paul Tassi wrote over at Forbes. He gives his opinion and some possible reasons why this is happening. I want to dive into if this is the norm, whether or not it's the norm for Xbox. Are we going to see Xbox return to the 360 days where it would beat out PlayStation and the Nintendo month over month, or is this a one-off flash in the pan? Is this because Xbox was at E3 and nobody else was, and so they were able to build up some momentum that didn't necessarily exist for other consoles? Let's discuss it. Let's talk about it and dive into this article. But before we do, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. My name is X1 the Gamer. This is the XoneBros. This is your positive gaming and Xbox community. If you like all things Xbox, this is the place for you. All right, let's dive into this. This is Paul Tassi. I always enjoy his articles. I was actually turned on to Paul Tassi by a friend of mine. Shout out TIE Fighter if you're watching this. Xbox Series X and S outsold Switch PS5 in US dollar sales in June. If you thought Xbox was having a pretty good June in the wake of their promising E3 conference, well, that was reflected in how many people ran out to buy an Xbox shortly after. NPD is reporting that Xbox is breaking its own records and besting its competition. In June, the Xbox Series X and S combined to outsell both the Nintendo Switch and Sony's PS5 in terms of dollar sales. Dollar sales being how much actual cash they brought in, while unit sales are total units moved. Switch still won in unit sales. That makes sense. That Xbox won overall dollar sales, not in unit sales versus the Switch. The Switch is one price, one item, $299, while Xbox has a premier Xbox Series X at a higher price and the Series S at a lower price. So that makes sense why they would outsell the Switch in dollar sales, but not in unit sales. Whereas they did outsell the PlayStation 5 in unit sales and dollar sales. And I think that that's one of the most interesting things because Xbox did, last generation, get its clock clean when it came to its competition. This is something Paul Tassi says we rarely see from Xbox, often a clear third place to its rivals. And this is reportedly Xbox's best June in its history, breaking the previous record from 2011. Holy crap. Think about that. That's over a decade. That is a decade. That is 10 years. That's Xbox 360 days. That means we haven't seen this kind of success in numbers since the Xbox 360 days. That is a good omen because we all know how that turned out for Xbox. Xbox did really well with the Xbox 360. Is this going to be a repeat of those days? If you remember, Xbox 360 hit the ground running, really ramped up sales. PlayStation took a little while to get going. Eventually they did, and by the end of the generation, they were basically neck and neck overall. It'll be really interesting. Does history repeat itself? Does Xbox run away with this? Or is this a one-off? Let's dive in because I do think Paul Tassi makes a couple interesting points here that I'd like to talk about. He talks about why does this happen? He says, number one, availability. In the current state of the market, pretty much every modern-day console is selling out either immediately or in a short amount of time. So simply the ability to make and ship more units than your competition is a big factor here. Sure, it's possible maybe more people wanted PS5s than Xboxes, but if Sony couldn't produce them and Microsoft had higher output numbers, that could be a significant portion of the difference here. Now and that's fair. That's completely fair. We know that there is system issues, production issues in the wake of COVID with these systems. I believe Phil Spencer said he didn't expect till May, April of this year to be fully back on board, and they still are hard to find. Even with up production, ramped up production everywhere, they still are hard to find. To my understanding, it's also the case with the PlayStation 5. So that's a really good point. It could be just the fact that Xbox is outselling the PlayStation 5 in terms of dollar sales because of the supply issues there. Xbox is able to create more, particularly probably with their two-tiered system. Series S's are a lot easier to come by than the Series X. PlayStation doesn't necessarily have that. They've got their digital only and their non-digital, but let's be honest, the digital only box is what you're probably getting if you're a PlayStation 5 fan or looking to purchase a PlayStation 5. Nobody uses discs anymore. Let's be honest. TBH. So that's interesting. However, what that doesn't account for is the fact that these are the best numbers since June of 2011. In other words, regardless of whether or not PlayStation is struggling to bring supply to market, there's still a desire for Xbox. So that still bodes well. Whether PlayStation 5 would have more if availability was there doesn't necessarily matter. I guess it does matter in terms of whether or not Xbox gets first place or not. But it still shows that there's a huge demand out there. Indeed, they haven't seen this kind of demand since 2011, which I think is really giant. And that brings us to a second point. momentum. And on this, I think is another valid point. He says, as I said, Xbox had a pretty stellar June. Xbox Game Pass has become such a good deal. Its marketing campaign is now an internet meme. We talked about that on the show. That's the I swear meme that went out. E3 showed off a large number of promising projects from Microsoft, with this fall in particular bringing massive titles like Forza and Halo Infinite. And Infinite in particular had a complete perception 180, showing off footage that looks infinitely, well, I see what you did there, Paul Tessie, than we saw last year before its delay. Add to that the knowledge that tons of huge Bethesda games like Starfield are indeed going to be Xbox exclusive going forward, and many people decided maybe it was time to pull the trigger on Xbox for the long term at last. And I think both those points are valid. Both those points could be reasons that Xbox is in first place. Now, I definitely think Xbox does have momentum right now. I think it's undeniable that Xbox purchasing Bethesda put ripples through the gaming universe. I think Xbox, how aggressive it has been with Game Pass, as well as Project X Cloud coming forward. It is now available on all systems, all hardware, is huge. You combine that then with Windows 11 dropping, and a big portion of Windows 11 focused on its gaming aspect, again tied in to Game Pass. You then look at games on PC, which Xbox's strategy is to simultaneous release on both the Xbox and on PC, and you see games like Sea of Thieves and Forza Horizon 4 taking the number 1 and 2 spots on Steam in June, and I think it's hard to deny that the momentum is there for Xbox. Can they ride this momentum? Is this going to be a one-time, one-off thing? I don't think so. I think they're doing a lot of things right. I think they've laid the foundation for this generation. I actually think, and bear with me in this because I know a lot of you might smirk at it, I actually think getting their clocks cleaned last generation forced them, I would say about 3, 4 to 5 years ago, to completely refocus, which forced them to say, okay, this generation is a wash. Let's focus on next generation. And if you look back and you look at the things that Phil Spencer was saying the last 4 to 5 years, this was the vision. He said constantly, we want to be the place where players play their game anywhere they want, however they want, i.e. xCloud, i.e. Game Pass. When Game Pass first launched, it was widely criticized. This is foolish. This is silly. This isn't going to work. They've got to be losing tons of money. And the more success it has and continues to have, the more Microsoft grows and gains that momentum. And that's not something that you pull off overnight. That takes lots of time and development and negotiation of contracts. And so I think Microsoft forcing to take it in the chin, admit defeat, and refocus maybe has just forced them to hit the ground running this generation. Ryan McCaffrey over at IGN, who is, the Xbox guy and has documented Xbox since the 360 days. He's had Seamus Blackley, some of the original Xbox guys on his show for some really interesting interviews. He said before, like 2 E3s ago, that he's never seen Xbox this focused. And he posited the question, what does this mean for the future of Xbox? And I think we're seeing the fruits of that labor. I think we're seeing the fruits of that focus. I do not think that this is going to be a one-off. I don't think that the month of June is going to be it, especially as we roll into Christmas. I think we're getting games. Look at the end of this month. Microsoft Flight Simulator coming unchanged from the PC to the Series X. The PC takes a ballsy computer to run that game. You're going to be able to run it on the Series X unchanged. Psychonauts just came out today with a bunch of preview reviews where journalists and gamers got to preview the game, and everybody is raving about it. And that's a game that personally I've not been interested in, but after looking at all the reviews, I'm super interested in it. It looks like a lot of people are even saying it's Game of the Year material. It's that good. Then you've got Halo Infinite coming at the end of the year. You've got interesting marketing there. Microsoft does see Halo Infinite, in my mind, as its console pusher, as its Game Pass pusher. You've got Halo multiplayer going free to play, which I think is huge for the franchise. I think it's going to change esports and gaming again. I think Halo is going to be the premier esports first-person shooter game. It was before. It will be again. And I think Microsoft has a lot of these months ahead of them. Whether or not they do this next month or how many months in a row they do this, I think is yet to be seen. But I do think the value is undeniable, the focus is undeniable, and the product that is coming is top-notch and is good. I'd like to know what you guys think. Do you guys think this is a one-off? Is this dominance? I hate to use the word dominance. Is this being in first place? Let's use that. Is this here to stay? Or is this a one-off? Are we going to see them drop back down to third. Maybe they jump up for a month or two here or there, but they're not consistently in first place like they were in the early days of the 360. Let me know in the comments below. Again, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to this channel. My name is X1 the Gamer. This is the X1 Bros. Like, subscribe, and we'll see you guys next time.